Hey guys, it's Eric, and we're just fresh off the heels of our C-Suite Mastermind event that we held last week in Victoria, British Columbia. We brought about 50 brands out to Victoria for 2.5 days, because we had a welcome dinner. Just absolutely electric times with some incredible people. The content was fantastic. We ended up going out on a whale watching cruise and having a intense orca experience, multiple orca experiences, which was great considering the theme of the event of Apex operators. And so what we decided to do is we're going to release some of the content on the DTC Podcast, starting with one of my favorite appearances at the event was from my friend Rick Cadotte from Four Sigmatic, who's been a past podcast guest. Also got to hang out with him in New York this summer, learn more about what a legend this guy is, but his story of kind of coming into Four Sigmatic and making incredible changes that have absolutely helped propel that brand into new heights was really inspiring. And he gave a really great talk that all D2C brands can benefit from, just basically about the small wins that you can make, the actions that you can take to stack up to create some really big results. This wasn't a presentation based on hacks or tips or tricks necessarily, but this was a talk that really excellently encapsulated the D2C journey and a lot of the absolutely fundamental choices and fundamental actions you need to take in order to build momentum in your brand. So I thought this would be a great one to kick off our C-Suite series with. I hope you enjoy it, and on with the show.
The person that takes a map and stares at it the whole fucking time always gets lost, right? But the person that sits at a kitchen table, they draw a little path, they put the map in their back pocket, and they wander out into the wilderness, they always come back. That is the premise of how I operate today. In a world of margin, numbers, spend more, make more, you start to forget some of this. You need to arm your consumer with talking points that they know, because you inserted those talking points. Are we doing short form copy in a way that's helping people talk about our product to their friends? Look at your website like a Times Square flagship store. You can see exactly where people are clicking. So how do you make it like the flagship store? How do you make sure that that website and that journey is actually selling for the brand, not just a purchase funnel?
Ready to expand your marketing strategy into CTV ads? Roku, yes, the same Roku that powers nearly half of all TV streaming in the US, has just launched a game-changing self-service advertising platform custom-built for CTV performance. Introducing Roku Ads Manager. Roku Ads Manager was built with growth marketers in mind. Roku's CTV algorithms optimize your ads in real time, effectively reaching your target audience at scale. Meanwhile, interactive action ads, our integration with Shopify and other performance features, make it easy for you to run ads for your viewers to convert directly from their Roku remote or mobile phone. It's easy to set up your first campaign. Head over to advertising.roku.com/DTC and get started today for as little as $500. It's time to take your CTV ads to the next level with Roku Ads Manager. I'm super excited to welcome Rick Cadotte from Four Sigmatic to the stage. I gotta pull up his...
This is a kind of talk that I do in a bunch of bigger settings, and I want it to be more personal. So interrupt me, raise a hand, call bullshit if you think something I'm saying doesn't actually apply. I'm serious. It would lead to better discussion, and it's a small group of people that all do what I do. The only difference is I happen to be standing here and not sitting there, so that let's be real about it, not pretend like I'm some expert that knows more than all of you. It's just a different way of looking at it. All right, so the basis of this comes from the idea that the fundamentals work really well, right? At the end of the day, I'll get into what I've done before Four Sigmatic, but at the core of what works, it's finding small wins that lead to bigger results. And a lot of times those big bat swings will lead to bigger misses, bigger risk, bigger loss of investment. So focusing on the small things and doing them really well. My background for why you're listening to me, why I'm up here, what do I do, what am I good at? Prior to Four Sigmatic, I did venture capital in private equity. So I was an operating partner. I'd come in, I was the devil that you all hear about. You get investment from institutional funds and they send someone like me in to go ruin your life. there's a lot that was soulless about that, and there's a lot that I did make decisions that probably hurt how someone thought about this brand that was their baby for a while. But I could bring almost any brand to cash flow positive within 6 months. If checking the right box, we can make it grow. So at the end of the day, there's art and science, right? And I had an opportunity to get out of that world during COVID, and I took it, and I decided to go to a brand, and that's when I found Four Sigmatic, started talking to Taro, and joined forces because I wanted more soul in my life, and I wanted to be able to help beyond going in, starting with firing a bunch of people, saying you're useless, and now let's go make some money. It's cool, but it doesn't make you sleep better at night, right? So when you're running a brand and you get to talk about this stuff with people and you get to have more fun, we have these conversations that are more personal and you get to learn, and it feels like you live with a purpose, right? So that's the background, right? And what the hell is this title? It has nothing to do with that. Map Charged Wind Talkers. Growing up, my family is actually from Canada. Some of you heard, couldn't get into Canada yesterday, ironically, but very Canadian. We have a bunch of wilderness land up in Quebec, and as a kid, one thing I learned that I carried today is that the person that takes a map and stares at it the whole fucking time always gets lost, right? But the person that sits at a kitchen table, they draw a little path, they put the map in their back pocket, and they wander out into the wilderness, they always come back. And that is the premise of how I operate today. Plan, 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 throw the fucking plan away and go operate. A lot of times talk takes place for action. So make the plan, think about how you're gonna do it, detail it out, war game it in your head, and then just go do stuff and trust your gut, right? So there's the happy medium there. And a lot of this framework, and this presentation is kind of more of a mental model than this is exactly what you do and these tactics work for everyone, because anyone that says that stuff, in my opinion, is generally lying to you and they're unsure of what they're talking about. So I want to try to give you guys value from what I've learned and distilled in a way that I hope most of you could then take away and say, they're semi-valuable, right? So I try to go into bigger planning of a crawl, walk, run, refamiliar yourself with the business, and we'll talk about what I think that means something different to everyone. Walk, where do you want to go, right? So when you're putting that map in front of you, like, what is the destination? What are you hoping for at the end of it? And all of us, I think, sometimes lose track of like putting that destination there to then find a way to get to it. And it sounds so simple, but then when you're going and you're putting together your own little personal agenda, you're like, I'm just operating at this point. And like, I've been doing this for months and I've kind of lost my way. And then run, that's when you put the map in your back pocket and you just go get shit done, right? And then at the bottom here, revenue milestones, which this is something that I've seen in the private equity side. At these points, you generally should go back to crawl and start again. I don't really know why, to be completely honest, on some of the points. For instance, 35K a month is where you're at the point where you actually have enough money to go do stuff with other people. At the other end of the spectrum, at 9 million a month, you're generally at the point where you're advertising on Meta to the majority of Americans, right? So when you take into a frequency and CPM costs on average, your distribution of those ads are generally to every American. So you need to get more creative on like, how do you do demand generation outside of just Meta and like that sort of fundamentals that we all know work just really well, and you shovel until it works better. But those are the inflection points that I've seen, and they're roundabout numbers. You should probably stop, take a second, take 2 days off by yourself and go reset and say like, where are we at right now? And like, maybe I should rethink about how I'm doing everything, right? And like, just make sure that I'm back to where I'm not saying like, we have strategies from when we were way smaller that are still carrying on today. And I'm like, why do we do that rule? Where did that come from? And they're like, well, we've been doing it forever. And I'm like, we're triple the size at this point. The rules need to change. So understanding your business, unfortunately, it really comes down to margin profile, right? And I look at this a little differently than most people. I have a background in finance, so that helps. I like spreadsheets and stuff. But let's not get lost in the numbers. At the end of the day, if you understand your margin profile, you could back into how much you could spend on marketing to then come around, right? So you have restrictive covenants saying like, hey, contribution margin or EBITDA after people costs and some of those non-channel specific costs need to be positive. It needs to be 5%. You've got a banker. He says it needs to be 10%. Okay. This is for a real company that I've helped out. It's a normal margin profile. But you can go in and you put all the numbers besides marketing in there, and then you'll get a roundabout number of how much net sales percentage of marketing you could spend on a monthly basis and still say, I'm semi towards my contribution margin goal. I'm semi towards EBITDA. And you could then go out and operate, like I said, put the map in your back pocket and just go. And at the end of the month, you're like, hey, made 100,000, spent 23. Like, we're probably fine, right? Let the accountants do the rest and tell me if all of a sudden my cogs are off, my catalog starts to skew towards a product that's less profitable. That's fine, but it's all reactive, right? The biggest levers are how much you make and how much you spend. So just being in control there. And then in the vein of control, figure out what in the margin profile, and this should all be done once, right? Like this is not a daily, this is not a weekly, this is not something that you should spend too much time on, but do these thought exercises by yourself or with your top 2 people or whatever. What do you have the most control of in your margin profile, and what can we actually move, right? Because there's a lot of shit you can't move, and you're like, oh, we're gonna go pay less for shipping. Like, good luck, right? Like, we all are trying. But what you really can do is start to charge people more for shipping and put margin in that shipping rate. You can move up the free threshold for shipping and capture more sales, which will then offset your logistics and outbound costs. Spend less. You renegotiate and fire Pilot House, get rid of agency costs. And software and consultants, as you grow, again, part of that milestone thing, you accumulate so much bullshit software, everyone does, right? And you stop and you look at the credit card and you're like, so we've got 30 grand in software costs, and I realize that no one's logged into 20 grand of that. Just cut them, right? And doing those rebalancing once in a while then frees up more money to dump back into marketing, which gives you more sales, and you get to find these little pockets of opportunity. That is not magic. This is not saying like, hey, new UGC or new, like, no. Just find more money to spend, right? And where can you find those little bits? And that's the same realm of just question everything once in a while. Step back, go through the credit card statements, ask people about stuff, be that annoying leader that's going through every single charge, and be open. Be like, I'm not here to bust your balls on the little stuff. I'm just trying to get a good picture in my head of where we are, right? And those things to me have always given at least 10 grand of just money to spend on marketing. And that 10 grand provides you 15, and that allows you to spend another 23% of that 15, right? And you can just keep the cycle going, and then there's growth there, right? And nothing I'm talking about right now is like tactical to the point of this is how you go make new creative, this is how you market and message. That stuff works, and we'll talk about some of what I think about that, but my magic really happens inside the P&L, right? And then finding more money to dump onto the fire. So starting to talk about the non-monetary, and like I said, there's art to the science. This is Ken Blanchard. This guy wrote a bunch of books about business, and they're all dull. They all have a few good points, and the one that's really interesting is Raving Fans. His book is great. He wrote it in early 90s. And it's like, I mean, it's a snooze fest, but the concept is hard to ignore, right? Because in a world of margin, numbers, spend more, make more, you start to forget some of this shit. And this is what actually keep in mind of the ads you're making should create raving fans. Okay, how, right? And a lot of that comes back to the fact of you need to arm your consumer with talking points about your product so that when you're invited into a conversation with a friend, they say, oh, your beer's warm? And they're like, have you heard of Frost Buddy? And they have talking points that they know because you inserted those talking points, right? And then you're allowing them to be a raving fan. And that sort of stuff comes back to the ads you're putting to work with the dollars you're making in this big math equation. You should also be doing the thought process of, are we doing short form copy in a way that's helping people talk about our product to their friends, right? And arming your consumer with the knowledge they need to insert you into the conversation for you at no cost. This is not a referral program. It comes up and then now they have a relevant topic to talk to a friend about because of you. How do you make it relevant? How do you help them understand when you should be inserted into the conversation? And that's what this old man does. He talks about that stuff. It's cool. So going back to math, right? We have the luxury, not all industries do. E-commerce is a big math.
let's take advantage of it at the end of the day. No.
SaaS is not. SaaS is just go charge as much as you can and take as much back as possible, right? And it's like, okay, hard as hell to sell. Service industry, it's a lot of feeling what people are willing to pay for something. E-commerce, you need more customers, you want them to spend as much as possible, and you need them to come back. Like, come on, don't lose sight of that. Because if you just keep hammering home and when you feel lost or you're not sure what to do next, just go back to the basics. And remind yourself that if it's inside of one of these, it'll help. It'll definitely help. So what do we mean by customers? And for this one in particular, and this is what I was saying, I tried to zoom out here so that I'm not telling you exactly what to do. You could put real KPIs here, like you put marketing spend, distribution could be CPM, action could be click-through rate, monetization is conversion rate, right? And you could then make this into a real math equation and go model it out. But when you get a customer, you're spending, you're trying to put your distribution, meaning ad distribution, you're trying to make that ad go to as many people as possible, and you want as many people as possible to take an action. You want as many of those people that took an action to get monetized, right? So think about these things when you're going to do a billboard, when you're going to do anything that comes back to attribution, which is just ridiculous on a whole nother rant that I could go on. But you still need something to say, what do I scale against? If attribution is false and no one believes in it, well, then how do I decide to spend more money, right? Like you need something, right? So I hate attribution, but I rely on attribution, but I think it's bullshit, but I still need it, right? So try to find some equations that work for your business that are specific to you, that help you find a North Star and say, here's a campaign that I actually don't think is gonna make a lot of people purchase, but I want it to do this, right? I want it to move product on shelf in a new store we just opened. Apply it, right? Like, how do I spend money to get our brand out to as many people as possible that then I could get to take an action, whatever that is, and then make money off that so that I could spend more? It's the same thing over and over. It's a big cyclical spiral. And then AOV. AOV is used on this slide only because it's all of you, but normally you just be like, how much can I make them spend, right? And offer, the reason it's asterisked, we'll start there. I myself sometimes lose sight of the fact that when we talk about offer, it's used everywhere. And you're thinking about how much can I discount? How much can I give off? Blah, blah, blah. In reality, discounts are working as a crutch because you didn't sell the consumer before. Not many of us sell a real commodity where the consumer actually knows what that goes for in the marketplace. So what is a discount, right? I'm like, hey, here's this mushroom coffee, but today it's $12. And they're like, well, how much is it regularly, right? Like no one knows, right? Like we do. And as the operator, you're thinking that's a great discount. Like we're giving them 30% off, but it doesn't really matter, right? And it's just, you're bringing some sense of urgency or time sensitivity to it to try to get them to convert. But if you had just done a better job bringing perceived value into their head, you probably could have sold it at full price and said, the offer is the solution to the problem you need. And there is no discount because you're thinking that you would pay $100 to me to solve that problem and I'm giving you a $20 product, right? So perceived value and then upsell, always sell them on something at the gift store, right? Like try to do something at the end, like a little, and take the pen, right? Like you get those couple dollars and that goes a long way. And then minus friction. What friction do you have inside of that cycle that could make someone rethink what they're doing, recalculate the perceived value, think about another option, or feel like a delay is not that big of a deal, right? So that comes out of the AOV. And then you have to subsidize those people with the purchases of everyone else. So how do you reduce that? And frequency. Frequency is retention. Retention is a word that I think is now more associated with email and SMS than it is with reality of what you need to do as a professional in retention. It's frequency. You should be pretty squarely focused on how to get your own wallet share to expand as much as possible. So messaging accuracy, starting at the top of funnel. When you first spoke to this person, how accurate were you in telling them what you're offering? If you're not, they're gonna be pretty pissed off when they try it and they're like, well, this sucks because you said I was about to take shrooms and I'm not high, right? So how do you make sure you're accurate and you're giving them what they want? At the end of the day, if you think about, like, as an anecdote, you think about McDonald's and the McDonald's success, and there's ease, but really, at the end of the day, their biggest success came from consistency. You can go to McDonald's anywhere in the world and it tastes exactly the friggin' same. Okay, so then it becomes easy to lean on it. You're tired at an airport and you're exhausted and you're like, but I'm starving. You know who you're about to go talk to at McDonald's, even if you're in Singapore. Feels safe, it feels predictable. It's because there's messaging accuracy and there's accuracy in the production of what they're making. So you can lean on it. So how do you take that back to your business? Like, how do you just make it so that what you're saying you solve, you actually solve for them so that they keep looking for that solve? Consumption pattern, and that's buying behavior to the point of, are you overselling something that can't be redone or reused or upgraded or whatever? And maybe, like a crochet pin, right? Like, you need one, maybe two, and then you're talking about gifting, right? So it's kind of hard because you're like, well, I'm not selling subscriptions for these friggin' things. So then it's like, well, how do you put yarn packages? Or how do you put, like, these different things that, like, all right, manipulate the buying pattern, get them to keep coming back? How do I get them to log into their portal so they see more of my products? And that's the consumption pattern outside of the initial thought of, okay, well, I don't sell something that gets consumed. I'm like, you should. So figure out how to put complementary products into your mix that can get people to log back in. The same thing, so when we did SaaS, what was fascinating was the game is always, how do you make someone interact with your product as much as possible? And you're actually, like, worrying less about the product team is like, oh, look at this feature, and you can click this button now. And I'm like, that's cool, but I just want to log in as many times as possible because then we can make them do things. Right, and we can put a stone wall in front of the coolest feature, and then they're like, I'm gonna pay a little more, and you're like, there you go, they're at $1,000 a month. They're like, log in, consume, do more, interact with my brand, think about me more, wake up wanting to hear about my things, see my email and be excited to open it because you're wondering what I'm saying, right? So that comes into consumption pattern. Product effectiveness, kind of the same as messaging accuracy, because every product is effective if stated correctly. Right? Like, even the worst product does something, right? Like, the pen still writes and the flower still smells like a flower. Like, it might be dead, but it's still a flower, right? So just be accurate and make sure that you're conveying what your product does best so that someone understands that and they're not thinking about it differently. And then ongoing relevance. Is it something that in 2 years from now, they don't care about anymore, or it was just for a period of their life? They just needed it here. And once they move past that period of life, it's not relevant. So then how do you build in product mix or something that helps you extend the relevancy in the time frame that your product can be inserted into someone's life? And then this is the most mathematical here. What you're looking at the bottom is a big calculator that I started to make years ago and I kind of have perfected over time. This is the first page of an actual P&L, but it provides a calculator for different scenarios. And all the greens are input, so what you can't see because it's really small, you're looking at the top here, you get gross sales and net sales, and these are modeled into because of all this. And you've got subscriber sales or MRR, and there's a bunch of calculations in there, but what you're playing with are these green lines. And you're at subscription growth rate is a part of acquisition revenue, but you can control churn, you can control revenue per subscriber, mix, buying frequency, revenue per subscriber on a 30-day period. So you're not logging into Recharge saying, like, here's my number of members. It's like, do they all buy every 30 days? Like, what's my MRR? What's my actual recurring revenue that I could go lean against to grow this thing? And then down here, you've got paid media, which is the biggest piece, affiliate and partner, email, SMS, organic search and social, and then other. And that makes up acquisition revenue. So acquisition revenue being the dollars you paid to drive, right? And what you're playing with in those is generally paid media, right? And yes, you can get deeper into email and SMS, and there's a lot of tactics there, but it's actually harder to war game. It's harder to figure out, like, if I send this email, I will make more money. Like, then send the damn email. Like, send it every day. Like, if that's actually that easy, great. But let's put out a 12-month run of, if I spend this, and my CPM is this, and my click-through rate is this, and my AOV is this, what does my revenue look like at the end, and what am I making to the bottom line? And then you can start to war game for scale, and you could actually see, at least in a range with a margin of error, how much you could actually put behind and how much you should be focused on tucking money to that subscriber revenue so that you could lean on it and grow off of it. You can look at margin of error on, so I'm going to go full tilt. What if all of a sudden CPMs triple, right? You get to see that sort of stuff and at least get a glimpse. I'll share this template with you guys after. For years, I thought about selling it, and then I realized the formatting sucks, so no one would ever pay money, so I'm just going to give it to you. But so understand, it's free, okay? But it works really well. I've used it on a bunch of businesses. It's surprisingly accurate if the numbers play out as you would think they are. But when I send it, I'll put a little descriptor of like how to use it, but monkey around with it, and like sometimes it's insightful to be like, actually, it's better to spend here, here, and here, and low here, here, and here, right? And then you'll make more total in the 12-month run. And that sort of thing is a fun exercise to sit there and just play with. Top considerations that are not taken into account to keep in mind: cash conversion cycle. When you're spending, be mindful of how much cash you have in the bank account and when the new Shopify revenue or whatever revenue you're taking hits your bank account. So you can only scale so fast, right? So if you have a bunch of funding and you're sitting on 100 million in true cash, one, you should probably invest it, and we should talk about that too. Come to me if you have that much in your bank account. But normally you don't, right? So then what is the point where you're actually spending so much on ads that your cash conversion cycle and the billing period for those ads is falling outside of the cash conversion cycle, right? And if you're growing more in retail, your cash conversion cycle becomes 90 to 120-ish days. Keep that in mind, because that fucking hurts when you're at scale, right? And then that's where you start to look to working capital. People start leveraging against invoices, and it's a deadly cycle if you're not managing your cash conversion cycle. Restrictive covenants, this is what I was talking about before with like, if you've got a bank or you've got an exit plan or you've got something that you need to keep in mind, be like, okay, cool, we could scale to $100 million, and this model showed me exactly how to do it. I'm like, well, it's probably not showing you how to do it when you look down below this part where you're looking at margin and EBITDA and how much you're gonna lose. So figure out what your restrictive covenants are if you have to stay a certain part cash flow positive, if you have to spend under a certain amount because of cash conversion cycle. Make sure you line those things out. And then capacity for risk. Don't go spending $1 million on Facebook unless you're ready to lose $1 million on Facebook. Like, right? What are you willing to risk? And at the end of the day, the more you can risk, the more you could potentially gain. So figure out your capacity for risk, model it out, get comfortable with it, and then understand there's like a huge margin of error in all those numbers because they're force multipliers against each other, right? So all of a sudden click-through rate and CPM fall off a cliff, like you got a tough day ahead of you, right? So keep that in mind. And this is hunt for micro wins, this sort of thing. Again, this goes back to like sort of milestones. Where I started this presentation was do the little things and find wins, right? So we go back to like click-through rate and AOV and repurchase rate. All of them multiply against each other, so small movements in each of them actually makes a big difference. So don't go out saying, I'm gonna redo my website because I think I could double my conversion rate. I'm like, okay, that's what the agency that wants you to pay them $500,000 to do your website tells you. The reality is, find some killer kid that can just redo your buy box until all of a sudden you're finding 10% increase in conversion rate, 10% increase in AOV. Find those things first, right? And then think about what's working there and how do you apply that to maybe a rebrand. And like, if you do want to do that stuff, I think it's healthy periodically, but in the grand scheme of things, hunt for the little low-hanging fruit that can go find you wins off the bat that you could tuck into your pocket and just keep running, right? There's tons of them, and it's easy for us to look at the big shiny objects and lose sight of the fact that there's a ton of little opportunities in front of you that you can just go grab, right? And they're unsexy. It's shoveling mud, right? There's no question about it. A lot of times it's just yanking on a lever until you see it move. And you're like, okay, cool. I just honey badgered my way into 10% click-through rate increase. Like, what does that do for CPM? What does that do for my conversion rate? What does that do for all these metrics on either side? So if I can keep everything stable and move one of those just a little tiny bit, we make more money, right? Like, and this is a very last minute slide, but the unsexy stuff does always win, right? And product market fit, awareness, make more people know about you, merchandising, retention. Let's, product market fit. So let's take a step back, right? And this one's cool to talk about. we all know that iOS shit changed everything, right? So up until the iOS changes, we all got drunk on direct response. You just put more money in Facebook. It goes and finds more people that are both good for your brand, but also it knew that they were ready to purchase something. So it put your product in front. Okay, so if all those demand signals fall out, we went through a period, and every one of us went through a period of reconciling, like, now what? Because this isn't working, and I'm investing in it, and it's just not doing what it used to do, and now I'm panicking. And then you start to come back and you're like, well, shit, we're going to go back to business school now. And it's product market fit, it's building awareness. And it's like, well, these are not revolutionary terms and thoughts, but they're actually kind of big when you're implementing them into your business, because you're like, well, how do I make sure I have product market fit? How do I understand that what I'm putting out to the market is actually the right product to this group? And it's easy to make ads that don't actually satisfy product market fit. And you just keep running against the wall, and you're like, these ads suck. The UGC agency I hired isn't making great UGC. And I'm like, what if it's your product? What if it's your brand? I'm like, hold on, maybe it's not the agency that you're micromanaging to a fault. Maybe. So selling is helping. So if you're not helping someone, you probably shouldn't be selling to them, right? The best disruptions look so obvious in hindsight. I think that's a Mark Cuban quote. It's fun to keep in mind, right? Like if you're a product that's hard to understand, you have to understand that no one's going to get it at first until it's in hindsight. So how do you worry less about being the new Uber, the Uber of what everyone puts in the VC decks? I saw hundreds, if not thousands of these, and they're like, I am the home advisor of tortillas. I'm like, what? What are you even talking about, right? But they're always trying to relate to something to make the investor feel like it's the next big thing and you should be investing because you make billions on it. But we aren't that, so don't try to make yourself that. So how do you say, I'm tortilla, but I'm flatter, right? And it's like, okay, well, that's not very sexy, but sure, it helps people understand what you're selling, right? And that's for someone. A tortilla, less calories. You're like, I'll buy, right? Like, cool. Caesar wrap, no calories, perfect. It's like making money. Awareness. What do you want people to know about your brand? And this comes down to a ramble that I have about golden threads and memory structures, and Eric and I have talked about it a bunch. When we're going out and doing awareness, it's really hard to measure. You don't really know how much you should scale against it, and you don't really know what it's doing until it does something. So it's a little scary at the first trust fall part. So what do you do want to do in order to mitigate the risk on that? And it's be purposeful with what you're putting out there. And I think about it as memory structures, right? So when we look at the conversion of the product, what did everyone that converted know about the product when they converted? Okay, let's start there. It's like, for me, it's coffee. It's actual coffee. It's a big deal because a lot of people think it's just ground mushrooms. So important. Even the people that you see our Amazon reviews, as a little aside here, and they're like, can't believe this is mushrooms. It tastes just like coffee. I'm like, it is coffee, dude. Like, I can't believe that you're on month 4 of your subscription thinking you're just stringing ground mushrooms. But okay, I digress. But also buy more. All right, so whatever, dude. Yes, the mushrooms taste great. It's coffee. It's a beverage. We use organic materials, and we're trying to make it as healthy as possible. And you go through, and they're semi-basic, but it's easy to miss along the way, right? And Frost Buddy, talking to Brock, they have a tapered pattern that all the cans can fit in. That's actually pretty cool, and it makes it a product differentiator from a lot of competition. So how do you get that stuff out to the world real quick and in ways that people are consuming on an awareness cycle, so that when they see your product in the offer later, they're like, they retained that memory structure of your product. And you could insert these little pieces of golden thread that you could pull on later. What was the incrementality in the search volume? And generally going to be low, right? So keep that in mind. You're not going to all of a sudden see 1 billion searches, but did you move the needle? Did more people go search that? Because then you're actually inserting these little golden threads into someone's mind, and you're getting some sort of read on the world's reacting, right? And then how do you make a page that's SEO'd up to that? And how do you play off of that? And how do you take that story point and then turn it so that someone's like, oh, it's coffee with superpower, and the superpower makes me focus. And what is the ingredient? I'm like, it happens to be mushrooms, buy the coffee, right? And you're push them through. So I guess my point being, in awareness, because you can't really measure it,
insert pieces to that that's purposeful for trying to drive a point of something that you can go find later, right? So at least at the end of the day, even if it all fails and you're like, we distributed it to 1 million eyeballs and we don't really know what happened because sales stayed exactly the same, at least put a new idea out into the world and at least put a different thread out into the world that you can go try to tug on later. Because generally those memory structures are able to be built on, right? You can go build on what you taught someone in that ad. And you could start to make your Facebook ads, your Amazon ads start to play off of those initial memory structures. Post-purchase survey. How'd you hear about us? And they're like, Facebook. I'm like, not really, right? It's probably Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss and like the post-purchase survey, in my opinion, is best used, and this is opinion, right? I get a lot of wrong opinions too. They're best used as, what am I doing that's sticking in someone's mind the most, rather than what did you actually, I know where you last came from. I know where you first came from. I know your device ID. I know your wife's device ID. Like, we're good. I don't need to know that stuff. What I'm interested in, what made the biggest impression on you from what you're thinking, like, oh, I heard about you on a podcast. And I'm like, we haven't done that podcast in 12 years, but sure. So it means something worked there. So maybe we should look into something different, right? And those ebb and flow, but it's a read. It's just another data point in a world of too many data points, but they help. Every data point helps. Merchandising, easy to forget. Merchandising is generally just psychology, right? So when and where your product should be entered in the conversation, this goes back to, what are you selling? When are you selling it to their friend? How do you help them talk about it? And how do you put products in your catalog or in your website that help perpetuate the idea that you solve for more than just the person you're selling to, and they can help. And then perceived value, play into that in the merchandising. How did you sell someone in those ads, and how can you put the products up top that they want? Stop putting the high margin products up top. No one wants them. That's why they're high margin, right? Like, put in front of them what they want, sell them on the secondary stuff later through email and stuff. And then I guess the last little anecdote here, look at your website like a Times Square flagship store. It's kind of a cool mental model to go through if you're doing work on your website. If someone walks in the front door of the M&M store, first you see all these M&Ms, you see the towers, and you're like, wow, that's cool. And it smells like M&Ms for some reason. They're pumping it through, and like it's just like magical world of M&Ms. You're absorbing the brand in that walk around the store, and you're then starting to look at like a little M&M castle and be like, should I buy an M&M castle? And you're like, oh, how did I find myself buying an M&M castle? It's like, because you got sold on the brand, right? And you started to get sold on the story and sold on the idea. So how do you do that with a website? It's completely manipulated. You can do whatever you want with your website. You can see exactly where people are clicking. So how do you make it like flagship store? How do you make sure that that website and that journey is actually selling for the brand, not just a purchase funnel, right? It's not just a purchase funnel. It's every touch point is another opportunity to talk to someone about what you do and how you do it and why they should tell their friends. Retention. Kind of talked about this. I'll be quick here. Product market fit, right? Like at the end of the day, the best retention people in the world come from a brand that has good product market fit. They're like not the best emailers, but they just know the market. Like you see it over and over and over. Understanding and reminding all of ourselves that retention is not just email and SMS, and they need to be sneaky good at making people purchase more stuff from you, come back. And how do you expand that wallet share during a promo period? And how do you take that owned audience and go activate them for a new product or a store launch or something? And who are the retention specialists or tools or tactics you can use that you can move the people you paid to buy, right? You paid for that entire owned audience. So now how do you get them to go do shit, right? And that's the magic of retention and retaining as much of that audience. So quick summary here, learn your numbers, figure out what impacts them, make a plan, focus on the fundamentals, make fast decisions when you're underway. So you just listen to me for like 45 minutes and I have nothing new to say. This is it, right? Like, unfortunately, this is the reality of how to grow a business. It is stupid simple. Remind yourself that it's stupid simple. Generally, the shiny objects and the new tools and the things that your manager wants you to sign up for will help a little if you're on fire. But first, set the fire. Like, and the fire comes from shoveling mud. Like, it's just like, let's do the really unsexy stuff. Let's master product market fit. Let's master good ad sets. And let's master things that scale at the fundamental level. And then you could put AI on top of it. But AI is not going to go all of a sudden make you 100 million. Like, it doesn't. it'll take you from 75 to 100 because if you're flying, right, like it could be the catalyst to bring you the little last piece. It's generally not going to be the thing that takes you from 0 to 100. This is just, I thought from my standpoint, so you guys could hear like at Four Sigmatic, what I see is working well. Like this is like data point of 1, right? AI ad buying, the Pilot House team wants nothing to do with me saying anything about this, but boy, is it fucking good. Like, it's really cool. I use a tool called Magix. I should be invested in them because I've told so many people about it, but it's good. And if you have the right human in the loop, so I actually suggest like you still have a buyer, right? Like, and I do it myself because I'm a psycho, but I do all of our ads personally because I think it gives me the best insight into what's actually working and then like helps me loop back. And I spend like an hour in the morning just going through the ad sets and adjusting them. But again, I'm not all of you. So I don't suggest all of you take over your ad accounts. Like that's probably not a good idea. Like do not listen to that advice. But layering in some of this AI stuff that does audiences with a good buyer and keeping the human in the loop, but putting in some of these things that are like all of a sudden AI determines like, hey, you should scale into this demographic. And it's like, it's males from Illinois that are 18 to like 19. And I'm like, okay, how many of them are there? Like there has to be like 5. And then you do what it tells you and you're like, oh shit, oh, there's $2,000. Like, you know, like, but it's still $2,000 that you did nothing but click a button for. So take it, it's cool. Creative testing, same realm. We went away from focusing on really complicated ad sets and stuff towards very stupid, simple advertising setups with AI. So complicated in a realm, but simple for us, and focusing everything on creative testing. Really purposeful, really strategic of like, all right, how do we talk about this 10 different ways? And then when one of those works, like what do we think worked and try to make that go? And like we've gone to pretty great lengths of creative testing, and the creative testing meaning what are we saying? What is someone absorbing? And what is that image in that creative telling someone? And thinking more about that stuff, and it works. Like we're just watching ourselves walk forward because of it. Direct mail, it's like free money at the end of the day. The email is overrun. SMS is overrun, especially in political. You get tons of like, end the Kamala war, and get out of my messages, right? So everyone's getting all these. So it's all infiltrated with junk. So your brand is falling into that junk. So now what do we do? How do we find more? Put it in their mailbox and like put a good offer, a little QR code. People scan through it, purchase. It's a new way to talk to, it's a new old way to talk to the consumer, but it works. Streaming video. Not everyone has the capacity to make the videos to put on streaming video, but if you do it. It's what I see as the next step of what we're all going to be focused on of how to make better videos that do long form storytelling about what you do and tell people about it. Performance PR, link B, press hook. These are old school marketing tactics of getting in big publications, but you pay per click rather than to an agency that's like, just give me $100,000 and I'll get you in a magazine. And they're like, oh, that used to be cool. Now I can just go to an app and pay per click to Rolling Stones and tell them exactly what to put in the article. Like, this is what you say. Works. Email flow, lead gen. Again, another opportunity for like free money, in my opinion. Email flows can always be tweaked. They'll never be perfect. The more you hunt for wins there, generally good. CRO, just keep tweaking stuff and messing around. It's never been easier to manipulate a website. Take advantage of it. And then this is actually just a cool little, how do you stack up? This is from the top 25 growing companies in DTC right now. And these are their numbers. Four Sigmatic doesn't beat all of them. I just think it's kind of cool to look at and say like, where am I better? Where am I worse? I don't think you should go out and try to get to $112 AOV if your product's $10, but it's interesting to know what these fast growing companies have as a formula. That's it.
Is out there for Rick?
Yeah, go for it.
What is something you've seen being like major roadblocks or big wins between that like 3 million and 5 and 5 and 9?
So, great question. Hot take that no one really likes to talk about, especially on stage, and I probably shouldn't either. Fire people when you're at your best. Trim the team. Generally the best time to get rid of some people on the team that were really good for what you needed yesterday. They're not good for where you're going. Yeah, that's like some of that stuff. But those milestones are generally where you have accumulated too much fluff. So then you step back. That's one of them. Software, understanding the changing margin profiles of your business. Like, yeah, when we got to 1 million, we were selling instant coffee and it had huge margin profiles. Now that we're where we are, we're selling ground coffee and the commodity price is terrible. So let's understand how that impacts the rest of what we're doing, and the rules that we set for marketing percentage of net sales and all these things need to be changed because there's a completely different margin profile under your feet. So a lot of it is just resetting to understand where you are, what rules took you to where you are that you want to keep, what rules take you to the next step that you need to change, and just resetting, keeping your core values the same and resetting for the reality of what you're looking into. Like, all right, now that we're at $3 million, I could actually hire an agency to go do XYZ. Okay, you couldn't do that before, right? So then how does that change things? How does that make your team different? How does that look when it's underway, right? So like understanding what you're allowed to do next and what you don't need to do anymore. So it's a rear view mirror and windshield kind of idea, where it's like you could still be driving while you're taking those little mental models into place, and just pause, think about it, step away. Like I was saying, like as someone that grinds, and I just grind and grind and grind, the most important thing for me is finding time for like a 24, 48 hour period where I completely unplug. I'll go like ski touring in the mountains with no service and like unwind. And I don't think about business, thinking about avalanche and snow conditions and stuff. And like you come back and you're like, let's rock, right? And get back to it. And you still are going to find yourself at 2 a.m. Like, it still is the game. I mean, like as much as you pretend like I'm going to do work-life balance, I'm like, no, it's work and life happens to occur. So stop once in a while along the way and use those times to go look at where you are.
I got 2 questions for you, my fellow mushroom slinger.
Let's go.
First one is that the Knife Guys yesterday had a pretty robust product launch schedule. You guys are obviously expanding into other products. Are you as rigorous on like, here's how we're launching, here's when we're launching, and new lines?
No. We are, so we're the number 2 coffee in Whole Foods. We do what they want right now. And we present a bunch of products that we have not actually made, and then we figure out how to make them when they say yes. It's a scramble, dude. Like I can't pretend. Like we have a bunch of rigor in the process of how to get the product to market, commercialization.
Okay.
But then the launch schedule is sometimes like, Whole Foods needs 10,000 units. The production ends here. And sorry, Clifford, you're going to get second batch and there's going to be tons of third-party sellers by the time you get it on Amazon. And he's like, dude, what the hell? And I'm like, just name the game, baby. Like that's showbiz. Let's do it. So we run. I wish we did. I don't know how to do it better, or we would. But we have like in the next 12 months, I think we're launching 10 new products. You can't communicate and go to market really well 10 times in a 12-month span. So some of them like tea, a lot of people haven't even heard of our tea because I haven't even launched it, but I'm going to launch in the fall, like in October, we're going to do a launch. It's been out for like 6 months, but like I just haven't had time to talk about it because we've had a busy communication schedule. So
Cool.
No.
You should jam with the Knife Guys. They got some cool shit.
Yeah, no, it's very good product.
Lastly, what are your thoughts on the RTDs? You don't want to ship any cans, do you?
Dude, I personally love RTDs, but heavy as fuck. And
you don't want to pay $60 for a 6-pack?
And our current manufacturing setup doesn't have the capabilities right now. I love them. We're actually looking into like cold brew concentrates and that sort of realm. Glass puts you into a whole new liability realm of breakage and chargebacks for that sort of like damage waiver. So you don't want to do glass, so you don't do glass, and cans are heavy and it's filled with liquid, and no one pours a concentrate out of a can because you have to do single use, right? So how do you do it? And like we're wargaming some of that stuff, but haven't gotten to a great solution, but I love them, dude. I love them. I think that's the best way. If we had an opportunity to do it efficiently and keep it into a margin accretive product launch, meaning it is better than ground coffee in its margin profile, because that's our core. If it's better than that, I would launch all day. I can't figure out a way to do it, to be completely honest.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
You talked about merchandising within the context of digital, but I'm curious about, like, you guys are in Whole Foods, obviously a couple other big retailers. Are you thinking about merchandising within the context of like driving sales from retail to online? And like, are you ever making investments in retailers where maybe it wouldn't make sense just specifically for the sales that retail location is driving, but you're doing it because, you know, that sale is going to end up online?
Clifford's laughing because I make him spend on these Whole Foods displays that he fucking hates because he gets no credit for them. But they drive velocity in store. They're a great opportunity. We're technically in a beta program, so not everyone has access. They're like, peel off money, try to make the margin profile of that channel, Amazon, stay where it is and spend as much towards omni-channel as possible in these realms that like, well, we're buying it through the DSP portal. So then like, we were just talking like, how do then we find that audience to retarget and bring them back to Amazon? In my eyes, the golden goose off on the horizon is how do you make a retail buyer subscribe on your website? Like I wish I had the answer. If I had the answer for that, I'd be on a yacht, not standing here. Like that's the reality. Like, but I don't have the answer. We've tried like hell. We've failed like hell. I try to dump as much into things that I think are helping for awareness generally that I can then retarget or replay on. But it's like hand wavy math, right? Like you're going to get close, but who knows?
I have a question about your finance background. We hired a recruiter. We're looking to hire a CFO. What are some potential things to look for in hiring a CFO to alleviate the risk of hiring a dud? They all seem quite, competent. So how do you find kind of the right CFO?
Find someone that used to do audits for PwC. Like they're pretty savvy. They've seen the other side of what people look for and they know all the ins and outs and they've seen people make mistakes. You probably won't find that. So then what's the real of like your answer? Someone that gets it from a realm of like plain English, right? Like if you could chat with them about finance, they probably know it pretty fucking well, right? But if they're talking with like big terms and like stuff that's like reconcentrated sentences out of a book, they're just repeating what they read, but they don't really understand it to their core. Have conversations, take them out to dinner, get them drunk, and then be like, let's talk margin. How does he talk about it, right? Like, I'm serious. And like, he could be wrong, but confident. And as long as you're like, oh, it's pretty close though. Like, definitely has an idea of what he's doing. Like, we're in, right? Like, I honestly, I think that's the sort of like the human mentality of finance where it's, what's the personality like, right? And then as long as, and not to mention, I guess the bigger picture is just hire people you think will complement you. Don't hire the person that you think is like, oh, they're just like me. This is perfect. And you're like, that's going to suck when you both have like competing opinions and you realize you're both too stubborn to let go. And you're like, well, shouldn't have hired the stubborn dude because you are too. I don't know. I don't really know, but I would say the conversational stuff, how do you talk about it? How do you talk about it with a buddy? It generally shows like they know what they're talking about. Anything else? Good? Cool. Thanks, guys. This was cool.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can do that right now at directtoconsumer.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.